Welcome to It's Not Me, It's You, breaking up with your comfort zone. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about the power of words, how language can shape perception and decision making. For those of you who don't already know, I'm Jack Betticallum, your coach, your mentor, your partner in crime, and your master of humorous transformation. So let's just get right into it. Words are basically tiny wizards. Just a few syllables strung together can start a war, make someone fall in love, or convince an entire generation that avocado toast is a personality trait. Words can lift you up, tear you down, or leave you in complete confusion. And don't even get me started on how one misplaced comma can turn "let's eat, grandma" into a crime scene. So let's use words wisely, or at the very least make sure they're properly spell checked before we start accidentally texting our boss that we appreciate their incontinence as opposed to the inconvenience. So words shape our reality. But how often do we stop to analyze the way we speak? To truly understand the power of our language, we need to step outside of ourselves and observe how we communicate. Have you ever caught yourself saying, "This is just the way I am," or "I'll never be good at this"? The statements might seem harmless, but they're actually very powerful clues as to the mindset that you've adopted, whether it's consciously or unconsciously. Our language is not just a reflection of our thoughts. It actively shapes them. And when we change the way we speak, we can then begin to change the way we think. Language it's more than just a tool for communication. It's a powerful force that can influence how we think, how we feel, and act. And language isn't just about conveying information. It's about shaping perception, influencing emotions, and guiding decisions. It doesn't make a difference whether you're in a personal relationship or in a professional setting. The words you choose and how you choose to deliver them can be the difference between strengthening a connection or creating conflict. Words that have meaning or specific meanings, such as a word that is considered an absolute or limiting word, or a word that is considered or viewed more as flexible or expansive. Those types of words and the words, again, that we choose can make and shape our perception. So when you think about it, every day we engage with words and we interpret, or from the way rather. So if you think about it, every day we engage with words that are reflective of our perception of the world. From the way we've interpreted news headlines, and don't get me started on that, to how we would internalize self-talk. Now, for those of you, obviously, who are wondering what self-talk is, well, self-talk is that inner critic is the person that we battle with most. And I don't even want to say person, but self-talk is really our the impact of language isn't just about what is said, but also how it's said. The placement of words within a sentence the tone of delivery, and even subtle shifts in phrasing can completely alter both meaning and influence decisions. So I'll use an example. Think about the same event being described multiple ways. Let's use this example in the setting of a business or in a professional setting. So if you were to hear the company is facing difficulties, how would you interpret that? Now hold on to that thought and change the phrase to the company is navigating challenges. Is there a difference in the way you interpreted and received each one of these statements? If you think about it, both statements are acknowledging a struggle. But one of the two statements may seem or feel a bit better. Which one of the two would you say? Does the company is facing difficulties feel good? Is it something that is, and maybe we can come to it a bit later, is it what you would see more as an absolute or a limiting type of statement? I would venture to say yes. Whereas the company is navigating challenges, again, same statement, they're both acknowledging a struggle. However, the company navigating challenges has a more flexible and expansive tone to it. It may even sound more proactive and solution-oriented. This small shift in the wording can change how employees, investors, or even customers react to a specific situation. I'll give you another example, and this more from a context of personal, or actually this is more general. And let's look at these two statements. So hearing, I don't have time for this right now, versus hearing, I'd like to give what I'm doing my full attention. Can we come back to what you'd like later? Do they sound the same? Are they conveying the same message? They are actually quite similar. However, and again, using the terminology of absolute and limiting versus a flexible or expansive statement, I don't have time for this right now would sound more dismissive. While the second, I want to give, or I would like to give what I'm doing my full attention. Can we come back to what you'd like later? Conveys the same message, but it has the aspect of respect, consideration, and wouldn't you agree that it feels a bit less limiting? Now let's explore for a second how the structure and delivery of words can influence perception and decision making. Framing and context of words, the way something is framed, can make all the difference in how we react. Because words can be used to emphasize positive or negative aspects of a situation, which in turn will shape emotions and responses. Now, I'm just going to give you what you might think is far-fetched, but given this world, God knows if this has already happened. Let's talk about a scenario here where you or somebody you know is about to undergo a medical procedure. Now, unless you're a robot, I know that the thought of having to undergo a medical procedure would actually get the thought of having to undergo a medical procedure would come with, of course, a nervousness, a need for reassurance, a fear, if you will, depending on what the procedure may be. Now imagine a situation where you're about to be rolled into an operating room, and even though you've spoken with your consulting physician multiple times, knowing that it's about to happen, you have this one last need to try to feel reassured about what is about to happen. And it's normal, right? You want to make sure that you are again aware of what's about to take place. So imagine a scenario where you're being rolled into the OR, and you turn to your doctor just before they're about to put you under, and you ask him or her that one time, I just want to make sure again, what is this surgery, or what is a typical outcome of this surgery? Now, I'm going to give you two answers, and I'll let you decide how you're going to react to them. But having asked your doctor for an outcome, or for him or her to give you a little bit of reassurance, which is what we're ultimately looking for, if you heard, don't worry, this surgery has a 90% success rate, how would that make you feel? And hold that thought, and now think of hearing this instead. Don't worry, this surgery has a 10% failure rate. Now, I would really like to know how many of you caught it right away. Because both statements are communicating the same statistics. But even though both statements are communicating the same statistics, there's a difference in how we have received this. There's a difference in the framing of the message. Would you agree that hearing something along the lines of a surgery has a 90% success rate is, or brings with it, a more optimistic and reassuring message? Whereas, even though hearing this surgery has a 10% failure rate, knowing that that translates to a 90% success rate, upon first thoughts, would you agree that that feels a bit more unnerving, risky? Does it trigger doubt? The first one builds more confidence, wouldn't you agree? Now, believe it or not, this technique is widely used in media, politics, and marketing, as you probably see on a daily basis. And this technique is used with the intent to steer public opinion. The word placement makes a huge difference. That subtle shift becomes a big impact. Where a word appears in a sentence can, and usually does, dramatically change both meaning and perception. And more than just words, there's tone and delivery, which is something that is added on, that actually adds another layer. Tone adds an emotional layer to words. It makes them either supportive, or confrontational. And I'm going to give you an example. I'll try to keep my tone the same, but I'd like you to think about hearing the same phrase, in this case, actually. And I'll give you an example. So in this case, I will purposely change my tone using the same sentence. So consider hearing, "Are you okay?" versus, "Are you okay?" Same sentence, different tone, different delivery. Would you agree that the first time had more of an empathetic or concerned tone, whereas the second time sounded a bit more dismissive or mocking, maybe even sarcastic? When it comes to sarcasm, I'm great at doing that, but that's a different story. And now think about this. Think about text-based communication. The same phrase that I just said, or that I just shared, "Are you okay?" Are you aware that many text-based communications often lead to misunderstanding? And that is actually associated to the fact that there's no tone, body language that helps interpret the meaning. In these types of cases, it is usually the receiver who is going to make their own assumption or interpretation of your message. And more often than not, in fact, I'd like to venture in the high 90 percentiles, even though I'm not a mathematician, I would say a very high or vast majority of people, when they are required to process and interpret a message, will be influenced by their own state of mind. We'll come to mindset in just a second here. So words, again, have and can be a very powerful tool, but the word placement, the tone and delivery can lead to a reaction or a misinterpretation of what is being said. Specific words also can influence emotions and behavior. There are positive or negative triggers, and positive or negative triggers will reframe a narrative. So again, if you hear a word that will trigger a positive feeling, regardless of what may be, and again, it's very easy to say, well, we can go really far here, but with a typical type of message, if your interpretation or what has been triggered within you is a positive narrative, then typically the remainder of what is being communicated comes across with the same narrative that you have framed it to be. Words, right? Positive or negative. The words we're going to use can either inspire or discourage. And even small substitutions can make that significant impact. Imagine instead of using a word, which is a very commonly used word, of problem, imagine using the word challenge. Or what about, instead of failure, what if we use learning experience? In each one of these cases, one is more, again, of the type of word that is limiting versus the other being more of an expansive word. So one will actually, in the case of replacing problem with challenge, challenge would encourage a problem solving rather than dwelling on the difficulty when we hear the word problem. Imagine saying something along the lines of, I'm bad at this. I'll give you one more example. So instead of saying, I'm bad at this, what if you said, I haven't mastered this yet? Do you feel, or would it make sense to say that replacing that phrase or that thought would encourage more of a growth mindset? Saying I'm bad at this again is something that becomes more of a limitation that you are not only speaking of, but you are actually providing a supporting statement to make it something that is absolute versus that flexible approach where you can say, instead of I'm bad at this, I haven't yet mastered it. You are again allowing yourself and you are encouraging a growth mindset. So I'll go into, I'd just like to add a little portion here when it comes to marketing persuasion. And there are so many other things that you can add, right? There are the way that we influence using commands and suggestions, or commands versus suggestions. Influence is a very important thing as well. Instructions and the way instructions are phrased can affect how they're received. If you compare, you need to calm down, to take a deep breath that might help, which of the two would you prefer to hear? What is the initial response or reaction to hearing either of those two phrases? Again, put yourself in a situation and listen to yourself hearing, you need to calm down. And then redo the same situation, hearing somebody telling you, take a deep breath, it might help. I think it's safe to say that the first phrase sounds more like an order, probably trigger more of a defensive stance, probably even would annoy you or have you react in a way that is not going to help you calm down, if you will. Whereas take a deep breath, it might help, would sound more like it's an offer of guidance without a direct or absolute forceful approach. So when it comes to marketing and persuasion, and this is what I wanted to share as well. Marketing, persuasion. Every single day, the use of words, and more so words, are carefully chosen when it comes to marketing and advertising. And that is done with the intent to influence consumer behavior. Imagine the choice of words or the selling of ideas using words. There are so many different examples. One of the examples that you hear and that we're very used to are these scarcity tactics approaches. Only a few left versus limited available versus sale ending soon, they create more of an urgency. And reading or hearing these things will trigger a specific behavior. And more specifically, when it comes to a consumer's readiness or uncertainty, scarcity tactics is proven to influence behavior and guide decision making. Because for those who are uncertain, when they hear something that adds an aspect of urgency, they will act. Then there's another piece when it comes to marketing and persuasion, which is the perceived value. And what is a perceived value? Well, perceived value is really what we're looking at. Perceived value is, by default, implies or can imply progress, even if the smallest of changes were made. A utilization of the phrase where they want to influence and trigger a perceived value interpretation would be new and improved. How often do you hear that? New and improved. Believe it or not, to see the simplest thing of new format becomes a perceived value. It's a play on words. Then there's one thing, or the last thing I'd like to speak about when it comes to marketing and persuasion, and that's the piece that is really utilized as much as possible, and that is an emotional connection. Words are carefully chosen to tap into one's self-esteem. So it's not just about selling a product. It's about selling the idea of a product that will bring value or a return on your evaluation of self-esteem. You hear it all the time when it comes to beauty products or when it comes to taking care of oneself. Imagine the phrase, feel confident in your own skin. Now, you can't tell me if you hear that and you're looking at, for example, a cream that removes wrinkles. There is that emotional connection. You're looking, again, your self-esteem might be impacted by the fact that you have too many wrinkles. You've been wanting to find a way to remove or to hide those wrinkles. And now you find a cream that is being sold with the tagline of feel confident in your own skin. Tell me that doesn't incite you to try it out or to buy it. Okay. So we spoke about mindset, right? And I'll just speak to mindset a little bit as well. I'd like to talk about how our language is also and is a reflection of our mindset. So the way we're going to frame our words will provide insight into whether our mindset leans towards an optimism or pessimism, possibility or limitation, right? An example would be a person with a growth mindset, as I had mentioned before, would be more inclined to say something along the lines of, I haven't figured this out yet. Again, it is not an absolute. It is flexible. It allows them, or it demonstrates that they recognize but are willing to work through. Whereas a person with a fixed mindset, as I'm sure you can understand, is, or would say something more along the lines of, I'm just not good at this, right? What is that? Where does that fit in? I'm just not good at this. It's closed off. It becomes absolute. A phrase as simple as I'm just not good at this, or using other words like never, can't, become absolute. And by examining our language, we can gain clues into our internal belief systems. Shifting our mindset can reshape our communication and ultimately our reality. So there are reflection prompts that can help reveal your mindset. I'm going to share with you 5 prompts to help you uncover how language would reflect underlying thought patterns. And before I get into that, I'd also like to say, if you go to the website, to yourmastercoach.com, you will have a section for documents. And in the documents section, I will be sharing documents, whether it be reflection prompts or journaling exercises or tools that would help you, not only when it comes to the area of power of your words and your mindset, but as we move on in the episodes for my podcast, more and more tools and exercises will be made available on my website. So let's come back to these 5 prompts. Take a moment and think about, if you want to get a better understanding of your own underlying thought patterns, take a moment to write these down and respond to them. And then we'll talk about, or I'll speak to the types of responses and where they would be within someone's mindset. So let's talk about the first reflection prompt, being, how do I respond to challenges or setbacks? Now, how do I respond, or how do you respond to a challenge or setback? What would be your first reaction to a setback? Would you automatically say, or would you think something along the lines of, this always happens, I can't catch a break? Or would you say something along the lines of, this is frustrating, or come on, but I'm going to have to find a way, or I'm going to figure a way through it? When you think about either of those responses, tie them into the type of mindset. To say something again about, this always happened to me, or I can't catch a break, would you not agree that it appears and it sounds more of a negative mindset? Whereas this is frustrating, but I'm going to figure it out, or I'm going to have to figure out, becomes more of a positive mindset. Because if you think about the words, those words would indicate, and your responses, would indicate whether or not you see those obstacles as permanent roadblocks or opportunities for growth. So think about that for a sec. Now let's talk about another reflection prompt. I'll give you a second to get ready to write this down. So, a reflection prompt. Do you use more absolute or flexible language? Now again, absolute or flexible. Let's just come back to what these languages, or the actual description of absolute or flexible, really boils down to, right? Absolute is something that's closed. It is something that basically is a statement, period. Whereas flexible leaves an area for either expansion or to continue to move forward. when you, and I'll use, so now an absolute statement, as I mentioned before, I'll never be good at this. It's a little harsh, don't you think? I'll never be good at this. What would you say to somebody who is trying something out for the first time or the second time, or is actually struggling with doing something? If you hear, I'll never be good at this, a week in, wouldn't you say to yourself, well, you haven't even started. There's still time. Why aren't you just, being open to the fact that with time, you'll be better and you'll continue to get better? So now coming back to the language, I'll never be good at this. This becomes, and this is very closely tied into our mindset, using an absolute statement like that is already putting up a blockage, a limitation that is going to stop you from moving forward. Whereas if you were to take that flexible response, or be open to the idea that you haven't yet mastered, or you haven't yet gotten to where you'd like to be yet, then you would allow yourself the time and the grace to get better with time. So a key takeaway here is, when it comes to the types of language, words like never, always, impossible, those signal a fixed mindset. Whereas yet, learning, improving show an openness to growth and change. Let's go to another reflecting prompt here. Do I phrase my statements in a way that limits possibilities? And again, these are questions that actually are fluid, in the sense of all these questions are following the same approach. They're following the same learning that I'm sharing with you here. So do I phrase my statements in a way that limits possibilities? What is limiting? Limiting could be an absolute phrase, right? So if you hear that idea won't work versus how can we adjust the idea to make it work? Which of the two is limiting? Which of the two is expansive? And let's just take a moment here. Both phrases or both statements, if you really think about it, started off the exact same message. That idea won't work. How can we adjust to make it work? So in both cases, the message is the same. We recognize that in the current state, it is not going to work, or it will not work. But the limiting aspect versus the expansive aspect, the limiting aspect just basically says won't work. And again, point blank, period, no forward movement. So it's not a positive mindset. It is more of that negative mindset. Whereas the expansive one, again, says, and think about it, says, right now, that idea will not work, but let's see how we can adjust it to get it to work. So a takeaway here, especially when it comes to phrasing your statements that could limit possibilities, is the way we frame thoughts will determine whether we shut down possibilities or we explore solutions. What about, and I'll give you another one here. I hope you're enjoying these reflection prompts, and I really hope that they're going to help you to better understand or figure out the language and your internal belief systems. And don't forget, on my website, you will be having or have be. Don't forget, on my website, there will be exercises and there will be documents that will be made available to help you further progress. So let's talk about, and let's come to this reflection here. Do I speak to myself with the same kindness I offer others? And remember, let me repeat the question. Do I speak to myself with the same kindness I offer others? Now, this question here is really more about self-talk. Again, self-talk is, we can see it in so many different ways. It's the angel and the devil on your shoulders. It's the a-hole, as I refer to him, that is actually pushing buttons in this small little closet that I call my brain. It is the critic. It is the cheerleader. It is basically the one and most important and most important thing that you would like to be aligned with. So I'm going to use two phrases here, and whether or not they resonate with you, I hope they do resonate with you. But when you speak to yourself, are you, again, kind or are you critical? Does your self-talk influence confidence and motivation, or is it more of a criticism and discouragement? Would you say, I messed up, I'm terrible at this? Or would you say, I made a mistake, but I'm going to learn and do better? So once you've got your answer to those questions, just remember that if you are self-critical, replacing self-criticism with constructive feedback will encourage personal growth. One more. So the last of the reflective prompts here. Do my words focus more on problems or solutions? Now think about that. Just think about the question for a second, and I'll give you two phrases, and we can see what your response will be there. So, do my words focus more on problems or solutions? Well, what of the two responses is more you today? Would you say something more along the lines of, this is a disaster, there's nothing we can do? Or are you more of the type of person that says, okay, this is a challenge, but we have to find a way forward. Let's find a way forward. Which of the two are you? See, the shift in language from focusing on a problem, which is whether you are problem focused or solution focused, the shift in a language from focusing on problems to seeking solutions changes that perspective, and it increases that adaptability. Let's talk about shifting mindset, because up until now we've explored how language shapes our interactions, our emotions, and decisions. We've also talked about the absolute and limiting belief system versus a flexible and an expansive belief system. We had a little set of reflection points to better understand where we would be from a perspective of our own mindset, our underlying thought patterns. But, and this is one of the questions that I hear, why do some people just naturally use words that encourage growth while others default to limiting beliefs? And the answer again, it's mindset, right? Our words are going to mirror our thought patterns. Think about how you describe yourself and your circumstances. Do you say, I'm bad at this, or I'm still learning? Do you tell yourself, I don't have a choice, or what options do I have? Again, those small shifts in wording, those small shifts reflect a much deeper shift in thinking. So as we move forward, we'll explore how our words reinforce our beliefs and how language can be a powerful tool for rewiring thought patterns. We'll also answer the question of how can we use language to shift our mindset, and what steps can we take to create a lasting transformation. So stay tuned. We're going to dive deeper into the power of mindset and how language can unlock new possibilities in our lives. In the interim, I'd like to just suggest, whether you're at home or in your workplace, try to be mindful. Try being mindful about how you frame your messages, your placement and choice of words, and even your tone and delivery. When you're mindful of those things, you can become more intentional with your language, which effectively would lead to more effective communication, establish deeper connections, and become a more empowering way of navigating. Next time you speak to yourself or you're about to write something, pause and ask yourself, is my message lifting someone up or shutting them down? Am I saying this in a way that invites connection or in a way that pushes people away? Remember, changing the way you speak to yourself isn't about ignoring reality. It's about shaping it in a way that empowers you. Your words are powerful tools, and by choosing them intentionally, you can transform not just that mindset, but your entire approach to life. In closing, I'd like to just say it's important to use words with intention. See, words carry weight. Words have the power to build relationships or break them, to inspire action or create resistance. Words can heal or harm, build or break, encourage or discourage. The way we communicate influences relationships, business success, and even self-perception. Remember, the way we speak to ourselves becomes the story we live by. When we shift our language, we shift our mindset. And when we shift our mindset, we open doors we never knew existed. So let's pay attention to the words we use, not just out loud, but in our thoughts. Those words have the power to shape our reality. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Remember, subscribe, comment, and I will keep you in the loop as far as when episode 2 will be coming out.